So welcome to tonight's webinar, How to Choose the Right Law School or Juris Education. So before we get started, I have a few housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded. We're looking at a 45-minute webinar, 30 minutes of just content and jam-packed information for you. And then we'll leave 15 minutes towards the end for the question and answer period, where you'll really get a chance to learn and ask questions that may have not already been covered in this presentation to our wonderful panelists who I will be introducing shortly. As well, you will get an email recording of this. That's a question I get often enough. So in a day or two, you'll have this in your inbox. So what is today's agenda really looking like? What are we covering? So we'll be talking about key factors to consider, how to evaluate programs and specializations, tips for researching and visiting schools, the importance of location, cost, and culture, as well as that Q&A that we mentioned earlier. So a little bit about Juris Education and who we are, whether this is your first time on our webinar or you're returning, welcome. We're super excited to have you here. So our JD end-to-end application support program refines your application to help boost your chances of acceptance. Our customized approach to perfecting your documents ensures your application matches the expectations of top law schools all across the country. We support you across the entire application lifecycle, whether that be from the LSAC application to building and crafting your personal statement, interview prep, and much more. A little more about the numbers you see on the screen. So we have 15 plus years of experience. We have a 94% acceptance rate across the board. And working with us, you're 4.5 times more likely to get a scholarship. And I highly encourage you to pop into your Google search at juriseducation.com. You'll come right back to our website where you really get a chance to learn more about who we are and what we offer. And of course, we have one-on-one consultations. Those are completely free, where you get to sit down with one of our experts and go through whatever those burning questions may look like, whether that's a school you're particularly interested in, or you have a deeper question that you'd love some extra support on. We do offer that as a service, and of course, it's completely complimentary. So, our wonderful panelists, I will pass it over to Jesse to begin, and I want him to introduce himself and then pass it on to Marcellus as well.
Awesome, thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Jesse. I'm an admissions counselor with Juris. I've been a writing center coach for all types of admissions, specializing in business school and law school admissions for about 8 years now. I was a writing center consultant at Emory University for 4 years while I was an undergrad. And then also I was a writing center consultant for the USC Writing Center while I was at USC in Los Angeles. USC is where I earned my JD and MBA. I know that the application process can be really arduous, so I want to do everything I can to be a resource to you guys. And I'm excited to talk about my experience and the insight I've had working with Juris clients. And I'm excited to get started.
Great. Well, it's tough for me to follow that, but I guess I will. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcellus Braxton, and I also work for Juris as an admissions counselor. But one thing I wanted to include is that I've also served as a dean of students at a law school. So this is near and dear to my heart. I love working with students. I love really helping them. And I also like working with students to help them find the best fit for them. And I think you're going to hear that a lot. You have to find what's the best fit for you. So if you have any questions, I want you to feel free to either put those in the chat or wait until the Q&A, but I just get excited talking to students, so I'm really happy to be here. And I'm going to pass it off to Jesse to start us off for the first slide.
Sounds good. Thanks, Marcellus. All right, so let's get started. Key factors to consider when selecting law school. So I know from experience, a lot of people look to like T14 as like the go-to kind of goal. T14 meaning like the top 14 law schools that are ranked in US News and World Report. And I think that reputation to a certain extent can be really important to a lot of people, and I understand why, mainly for job prospects, for opportunities, for placement in law firms across the country, for example. But I think in addition to sort of the brand name of the school, it's important to consider all the factors that go into it. You know, what is the area of expertise of law that you want to pursue, if you know it. And if you don't, that's totally fine too, but that's something to consider. how much financial aid that you require or might need in terms of scholarships. That's also an important factor, as well as the region and the location of the university, of the law schools that you are looking to. So all these factors are multifaceted, and we can unpack them, of course, individually in your consultation should you sign up for Juris, but also just more generally speaking for everyone in this webinar right now, it's just important to consider just more than one factor. And I understand the main factor is obviously going to be the name of the school, but just know that no matter what school you go to, there's always going to be a chance for you to make it to whatever goal it is for you career-wise, whether it's to make it to big law or public interest. The name brand of the school is not going to be the only factor that determines your trajectory or your goal. It's also going to be your GPA. It's going to be your alumni network. It's going to be your interpersonal skills. It's going to be your interview skills and your recommendations, and all of the sort of the holistic factors of that make you a prime candidate for whatever job that you want to obtain after law school. So these are just some of the factors to consider, and we'll be delving deeper into this as we keep going.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit more about reputation and rankings, because I think those are two separate things that are really important. So as was mentioned, rankings can be important. So, sometimes people will say, I'm looking at T14, I'm looking at top 25 or 30, I'm looking at top 50, I'm looking at 100, but you really have to dive into what that truly means. And also, as was mentioned, you have to look at the specialized rankings. If you know you want to do a certain kind of law, that's really what you're interested in, a school that might be ranked number 87 but is ranked number 13 in that specialization might be better for you than a school that's ranked number 30 but isn't listed on that specialization. So you definitely want to look into the rankings, and just know that rankings are just one way that you should be thinking about the school you choose, because you have to find the thing that fits for you. And that also speaks to reputation. So reputation might outweigh rankings in a lot of ways. And I'll give you an example. So for instance, the school I went to, the University of North Carolina, so it is fairly highly ranked, but one thing you have to think about is if you want to stay in the Southeast, you want to be in the DC area, you can look around and see the number of UNC graduates there are. And that was something when I was on the job hunt really stood out for me, because they weren't interested. They didn't say, oh, let's look at what ranking UNC was. Are you 20 or 30? They say, oh, you went to UNC Law School? I love that school. That's where I went. That's where my partner went. That's where someone else went. I think that also speaks to some things as well. So you're not just looking at national rankings, you're looking at regional rankings. And one thing I always advise people is just take a second and look at, say, a law firm or look at a legal organization. Look at some of the places where they went to law school, and that's going to speak to some of the reputation. Think about the area you want to be in. If you know that you want to be in, say, Washington, D.C., then there might be a school closer to Washington, D.C. that actually might be better for you, no matter what the rankings are. And so you really want to look at that. And the last thing I'll say about that is that don't worry too much about the rankings. Worry about what the perfect fit for you is going to be. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to say, hey, you went to the 78th law school as opposed to the 77th law school, therefore we will not give you a job. That's not going to happen. What they're going to say is you went to a quality law school, you got very good grades, you were very involved, and you did the things you were supposed to be successful in law school. That's going to matter a lot more.
Definitely. And accreditation matters because ABA accredits these institutions, and this is extremely important because if you don't go to an ABA accredited institution, you're not going to be eligible for the bar exam, and a lot of employers will look to that. So that's sort of like that's like the baseline criteria, and I agree with everything that Marcel's just said. It's not always about the ranking. In fact, it's about literally all the factors that go into your candidacy as a student in law school, and also as a prospective employee when you go through OCI, which is on-campus interviewing. So faculty expertise. So researching faculty backgrounds, I always suggest to my clients, because if taking this out of the context of admissions for a minute, it's human nature to want to be and feel special or unique, right? And that I think applies to admissions in a lot of ways, like whether it's undergrad or law school. You want to come across as a candidate that has a specialized interest in this particular law school. And one way to get this point across is by researching faculty backgrounds, looking at their legal research and connecting with them and seeing whether your interests align, and also that's another indication for the school, to understand that you're seeing the school in a different light. You're not seeing this as just any law school that you're applying to. This is a school that you actually care about. You've done your research and you've made them, in a way, feel special. And that's going to be, a plus in your checklist of the sort of the check boxes you want to get through when you're going through this process, because you do want to stand out in a way that's positive. And one way to do that is by making sure that you make the school feel that they are unique in some way. And they are oftentimes, based on what their ranking is in their specific subspecialty, for example, based on the faculty that might be esteemed and have a ton of publications in a particular area. You want to make it seem, and it should be the case, that you have done your research on the institution and make the point that you want to go there specifically, not just any law school.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to hear me say fit a lot tonight. And so this speaks to it. So class size and student to faculty ratio, this is something that if you work with me and you work with some of our other counselors, we're going to talk to you about, because you need to know like what fits your personality, what fits your learning style, in the same way that you approach maybe undergrad. So some people want to go to an undergrad that has 40,000 people. Some people want to go to an undergrad that has 4,000 people. Sometimes people want something in between. Law school is not exactly the same, but it's similar in the sense that you should think about what the class size will be. Because relationships do matter. Networking does matter. If you have a smaller class size or a smaller student to faculty ratio, you might have the opportunity to build a better relationship with that faculty member. That means the faculty member might have a greater chance of knowing you. That means that if you want to work with that faculty member, if you want to be involved with that faculty member, that could be to your advantage. Also, if you have a smaller class, oftentimes the assignments are going to look different. The reality is a faculty member who's teaching 90 students and criminal law class might be a little bit different than someone who's teaching a class that has 15 people in it. So your assignments might look different. The interaction might look different as well. And also, depending on what that looks like, there might be professors who are going to have different learning styles and recognize your learning styles. I know, for instance, when I taught, I'm a professor and I've taught law classes, and when I only have 10 people in the class, sometimes we're in a circle, it's more conversational, it's more interactive, it's just a lot different. There are some cons, though, of being in a smaller class. Obviously, if you're in a smaller school, that means you might not have as many faculty members, you might not have as many elective courses, you might not have as many specialized programs. So as we mentioned before, if you have a specialized program, that's going to be important for you to look up beforehand and see, does my school offer it? Do they have opportunities for me as well? And also, depending on who you have, the smaller classes might mean, less diversity in a lot of different ways in terms of backgrounds, viewpoints, etc. But there's also some pros and cons of larger class sizes as well. So larger schools, larger classes, more faculty are going to mean more electives, more specialized programs, more opportunities as well. There's going to be more diversity. And also, I always remind people that your networking is not just with attorneys, your networking is not just with faculty, your networking is with each other. Because your fellow colleagues, your students or fellow students are going to be in your field, going to be successful. And I always tell people, you should be building a relationship with them as well, because when you graduate, who are the people you're going to be reaching out to? Sometimes they're going to be your classmates, sometimes they're going to be people you know, or sometimes people they know. Now, some of the cons of when there's a larger class, you might not get that one-on-one time with professors, so that could affect your experience. So if you know in your mind that, hey, being in a big law school, having a large class and for all my classes doesn't work for me, that's something you should think about. Also, it's going to mean not competition. So it's just competition for attention, and I think faculty members are going to do their best to make sure that they are helping you as much as they can, but it's just natural that if they have 90 students, it's harder to reach all 90 for individual attention. So that means you might have to take more of an initiative. It's not that they won't be there. It might just be that you have to show up for their office hours. You have to reach out to them. You have to make sure that you're known. And, in terms of engagement, that could be harder for you depending on your personality. But the reality is that if you work with one of us, or one of our great counselors, we're going to help you talk through that. And so that's what we mean when we say, like, we're looking at reputation, ranking, but we're also looking at fit. And this is one of the things that we're doing. So we actually give this much detail to that thought. So.
Yes, absolutely. So alumni network and career services. So oftentimes, some of the times I think my clients overlook some of the additional aspects besides ranking and name recognition, I guess, of law schools. And I think one of the big factors that you need to consider is the alumni network. USC, for example, we call it the Trojan Network, and we're really, I think, known for that because of how willing people in the Trojan community from USC are willing to assist other people, whether it's to provide them referrals, whether it's to help them get those initial interviews, or to get face time with a recruiter, for example. Those are the types of characteristics of an alumni network that you want to see in a law school that you intend to go to. And not all alumni networks are made equal. I think, certain schools are, especially if they're smaller, for example, you're not going to have as many alumni to be able to sort of seek mentorship or help from. Whereas the larger alumni schools will have larger alumni networks. But you also have to parse through the quality of those networks as well, because certain schools may be large, but maybe the alumni aren't super well known to be proactive in helping their fellow classmates secure job opportunities or the like. So those are things that we can discuss one-on-one based on your individual list of schools that you come up with, and those are things that we can unpack from there. Career services is also another crucial aspect of law schools. Certain career services are really hands-on. They'll help with interviewing processes. They'll have interview workshops. They'll do one-on-ones with you. And then other schools' career services will be sort of more laid back or not as proactive in helping you. And one way to gauge and understand this is, first of all, touring the school, for example. That's a great way to get a feel for the school and to ask the tour guide and students that are on campus that day when you tour to see what their stances are and how they perceive career services and their alumni network, to see how it's helped them or not. So being proactive in terms of seeking out this information is critical. And it also, by virtue of that, by virtue of going to the school and touring the school, by virtue of asking people questions, by virtue of reaching out to staff members, professors, or current students at the law school, you are demonstrating interest, and that's not going to go unseen by the admissions committee. And I think that most schools, if not all of them, do keep track of who is actually participating in the law school tours, who is actually going to the school, who's actually emailing, asking important and substantive and meaningful questions, and who has sort of the gumption to go that extra step to pursue their legal career and their legal education. Maturity and inquisitiveness and curiosity, these are key factors that all law schools look for, and it's not clearly seen in a lot of the candidates. So that's just one way that you can stand out, is by seeking out information and measuring and understanding whether the school has a strong alumni network or they have a strong career services office. Those are just a couple of ways to really get a feel for the institution and to also demonstrate your interest as well.
Let me pop back in here. It's taken a second. Hello. I wanted to do just a quick check-in. I want to see how everyone's feeling, if we have any questions in the chat so far. Again, I wanted to just drop that QR code on screen. Feel free to take out your phone, scan it. It'll lead you back to that ability to book that one-on-one that we've mentioned throughout the presentation as well. So let's see if we have any questions in the chat so far. It doesn't look like we have any questions so far, but to our audience, please feel free to drop those in there. We do have that Q&A towards the end of the presentation as well. I actually have a couple of questions I was hoping our panelists can talk through. It is frequently asked questions that we get during our consultations. And one of them actually you've already answered, which is great. And it was talking about sort of the importance of law school rankings. On the other side, a question that we often get is, how do I balance work or internships while attending law school? I'd love to open up the field to both of you to, if you have any experience or if you have any sort of insight for our audience.
I would say internships or working during law school, I mean, I think it's commonplace to work at least part-time during law school, your second and third year. That's what I did and a lot of my classmates did, because that helps you get experience. Plus, you can either get credit or paid for that work. So it's always productive to do so, because you're getting something that you can put on your resume. So that's really important. And clinics are included as work technically, because you are doing legal work. You're under the supervision of an attorney, that is. I would say your first year is like, that's the year where you're taking all your doctrinal classes like torts, contracts, property, and those classes are all really heavy. Like each of them really packs a punch. So you really don't want to be doing too much work during your first year. It's going to be primarily at 85, 90%, if not 100% just studying. In some cases, I know I took a pre-law Barbary course seminar thing, and they were saying, don't even do student organizations or extracurriculars. I would say you could probably do that, and I think you should, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be studying 100% of the time. That's just not humanly possible. And you want to be able to socialize and get to know your peers, and that's important for, as we said before, establishing connections and being part of the alumni network and being part of the community at large of the law school, whether it be current students or recent graduates. And the like. So get involved in that way. But if you can help it, probably don't do. There's not really going to be legal internship or job opportunity for you to do your first year of law school, because you don't have any experience in the law. I think the first legal internship you could possibly do would occur your 1L summer, which is the summer after your first year of law school. If you have to work in order to sustain yourself financially, of course, there's no way around it. And that's going to be doable. If that's the case, I might suggest doing a part-time or evening program for law schools. There's a lot of really great evening programs, some of them of which are actually expedited, so you can actually graduate sooner than you would in a regular evening program. But that's something we can talk about one-on-one as well. And I'm sure, Marcelo, if you want to add anything, you're probably more experienced speaking to that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I wanted to add is this is where you need to do your homework, because every law school, there's internships, there's externships, there's field placements. Schools will label them very differently. So some schools will label, for instance, some schools I've worked at, an externship was something where you could take and you can actually get credit. So you might get credit for doing that work. And so what some people would do an externship for credit over the summer. Sometimes people will call that an internship. Also, is your internship unpaid? Is it paid? What does it look like? How many hours are there? Those are all the things you have to really think about. Also, you might want to look into see if your school has any rules or suggestions about your ability to work while you're in school. So I know some institutions I were at, they said, well, we recommend that you work no more than 20 hours during the school year. Or some would say, hey, we understand that you need to work as much as you possibly can, but here's what you need to do, and here's how many credits you should really be taking. So I think the balance actually might be you can talk to the dean of students who at the school, if you're there. Or also what you can do is you can really look closely into, once you get into it, when you're in your second and third year, you can say, okay, well, this semester is not going to be as difficult, so therefore I might be able to take on these kind of obligations. But preferably what I would say is you want to be able to focus on law school, because at the end of the day, when you're competing for these jobs, your internships and externships do matter, but also that can't be at the expense of you doing well. If you feel like you can balance it, that's fine, but you want to make sure you're getting good grades, you're really involved, you're really engaged, and you pass that bar exam. Because if you don't do those things, then your internships or externships don't matter. So that's the kind of balance that you really need to think about. And that's something that, as Jesse mentioned, that if you set up a one-on-one with us, we can actually talk you through that and give you some real life experience about what that looks like. And when we start thinking about some of the schools you're interested in, we can actually do a deeper dive and say, hey, here's some information about that specific school.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. We have a couple of questions in the chat, but I think we can save that towards the end. I just want to be mindful of time for everybody.
Yeah. Well, how about this? We'll go through the remainder of the presentation relatively quickly, so that way we can answer your questions. So let's talk quickly about how we evaluate law school programs and specializations. I know someone asked about that, and so we're going to talk about some key aspects. We're going to talk about core curriculum and versus specialized courses. We're going to talk clinic, externship, which we already started talking about, joint degree programs, research centers and institutions, and bar passage and employment rates. All those things do matter. So I'm going to talk just quickly about core curriculum and specialized courses, because I think that's always really important. So in my position when I was dean of students, I actually worked with every single student. They actually talked to me and we talked about what courses they're going to take. And so that's one of the things I recommend people do really early on. What you should do is, and almost every single law school website has kind of a sample of what you need to take first year, second year, third year. You should look closely at what core classes you need to take and make sure that you're covering those, because some people call them core classes, some people call them bar classes, depending on what you're looking at. So what you want to make sure is that you have those covered, because if you don't get your core classes done, then you're obviously not going to graduate. Required courses are always going to be really important. And then what you want to do is say, okay, well, I've taken my required or core classes. Now let's look at electives. And you can look at electives in a few ways. So if you absolutely know what you want to specialize in, then by all means, start taking those classes. But let me just give the caveat that I have so many students who come in saying, I know I want to do this kind of law, and then they take an elective course and they decide, I know I don't want to do that kind of law. And I think that's really important too. I always tell students that what you're doing is you're finding out information. Maybe you find out that that really is what you want to do, but maybe you find out that's really what you don't want to do, and that's okay. That's why they are elective courses, and that's why they are offered. So I think that's always really important. So what I always tell people is look at classes that seem interesting. Don't be afraid to take a chance, because it's not going to hurt you. It will only help you, because maybe you'll find out there's something you really, really love. I had a student who was like, I never want to, they were like saying, oh, bankruptcy, I don't care about it. And I was like, well, maybe you want to take the class. They took bankruptcy and now they're a bankruptcy attorney. Like I see it all the time. People are saying, oh, I don't want to do copyright or trademark. They took those and then they took one class and then they took all the classes. You just never really know. But one thing I would say, and the final thing I will say, is that be strategic about some of the classes that you take. Be strategic about taking classes that are going to give you information that might be helpful. So depending on what kind of law you want to do, there might be some elective courses that might be helpful in terms of your understanding. So feel free to take those and think about those as well. And also connect with faculty members, because depending on what law school you go to, oftentimes your faculty member is an expert in that field. So not only you're going to learn about that field, but you're going to learn about someone who's actually in that field, making a difference, et cetera, who you can connect to and have that networking ability with. So I'll pass it off and we can talk about clinical and externships and all that fun stuff.
Yes. I mean, I agree with everything Marcellus just said. So clinical and externship opportunities, they are crucial. I would say they are, besides doing well your first year and, getting a gist of what you like and don't like in terms of tapping into those electives and seeing if you do like, certain areas over others. Practical experience is the next big thing that would also allow you to see if this is the area of law for you. There are definitely a ton of clinics you can participate in, whether it's immigration clinics or small business clinics, or there was a clinic in my law school called PCJP. It was the Post-Conviction Justice Project, where they helped people who were incarcerated, argue for leniency or other types of outcomes from the courts. And in these opportunities, you're being supervised, but it is real experience. You are doing real legal work, and this will not go unnoticed by employers when you go through OCI. And when you go to any job interview and you talk about it, this is something where you can say, hey, I didn't just sit in a classroom and learn about these things. I actually put my brain to the test in a real life scenario, and here's how. This is also, I would say, this type of experience is in the same category as a real, like, if you were a law clerk or a legal intern for a law firm or something like that, a clinic is going to give you that same type of experience. And it's definitely something that I would recommend you do your second or third year of law school if you can, because it just is going to add that much more to your resume. And Marcellus can speak more to, I think, the difference between externship and internships in terms of whether they are credit-based or if you're being paid for them, for example. I'm pretty sure it's either or. I know at USC, it was, you have to do a pro bono. You usually do a pro bono externship, and when you do that, you're not getting paid because it's pro bono, but you do get credit for it. So you can, put that towards your experiential credits, which is a certain number of credits you need to do that. That constitutes your sort of your hands-on legal training that you need to do in order to graduate. And I think certain schools have different categories and different expectations for that. But all in all, I would say whether it's a clinical or an externship opportunity, these are hands-on experiences. You're going to get a lot out of it, and it's going to add that much more to your resume and your competitiveness on the job market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to Jesse's point, the best thing to do is check out the website of the school you're interested in, because they all have different rules. Over the last, it's been approximately about 5 years, where the ABA actually started to allow schools to say you can do an internship or externship and get paid, but some schools will not allow it, some will allow it. It really just depends. So depending on the school, they will actually talk about it. So I think, in the interest of time, these next few we'll just go through quickly, and we can talk more about them if you have a question or meet with us one-on-one. So we just want you to be aware there are joint degree programs. So some people want to do, say, a JD MBA, and it can help enhance your career depending on what you want to do. And what you want to do is look at the availability and the structure of the programs. And structure is going to be really important with those, because some want you to apply at the same time. So some say, I want you to apply for the JD MBA program at the same time. Some say you should apply for the JD program, and then after your first year, you can apply to the MBA program as well. So if that's something you're interested in, what I recommend doing is, this is why having admissions counselors at Juris is really important, because we can actually walk you through what that looks like for each one. Also, just know that there are research centers and institutes, so the specialized learning. So when you're doing your research, you're not just looking at rankings. You're looking at, what does this institution have to offer me? And that can be everything from clinics to externships to research centers, etc. And you can explore those. So sometimes they need research assistants, sometimes they need people to write. Sometimes you can do all kinds of really great things. And these are things that are going to make you stand out. So I know some of the questions are, how do you decide, how do you balance rankings? So if you have a really good opportunity to work at a research center or institute, that can go really far for you. And then the final thing, which is really important, bar passage and employment rates. So definitely take a look at those school bar passage rates. And you want to look at employment statistics, right? Because it's really great to go to law school, but for most of us, the point of going to law school is to what? Pass the bar and get a job. And so what you want to be able to see is, what are those bar passage rates? You want to see, what is the employment statistics? Because you don't want to go to a law school that says, okay, we graduate a lot of people, but only 30% of them get a job. That is not what you want to see. What you want to see is that we have a high bar passage rate and high employment statistics. And the other thing I'll talk to you about, it can be a little niche, but if you go to a school in a certain state, you should also look at the bar passage rates if you want to take the bar in a different state. So for instance, I've been doing students at a school in Ohio, for instance. And so many of our students took the Ohio bar, but we have a bunch of students who said, I actually know I'm going to move back to somewhere else. You can actually look up bar passage rates in for institutions in other states as well. That won't matter as much, because we've made some changes to the bar exam, but there's been some changes to the bar exam and things can apply. But you definitely want to just look at as many statistics as you possibly can, and that's really going to help you. And so maybe so rankings is not the only thing that matters there. And I will share a website for good law school statistics.
Yes. All right. So tips for researching and visiting schools. I think we've gone over all of these, but just to summarize, online resources is the first, the first and I think the primary resource is looking at the law school's website. They're going to have one. Connect with students and alumni. That can be done when you tour the school, or even just reaching out to them. If you have, the email of the admissions, which is usually on the website, if you want to ask questions, we can help you phrase how to ask those questions so that you're not coming off as like bothersome. Especially don't ask questions that are already on the website. That just shows that you didn't do your due diligence. Attending law school fairs and open houses, that goes without saying. We can also discuss in our one-on-ones what questions you want to ask during the visits themselves. In addition to questions you want to ask via email, those are really important as well to show that you are a knowledgeable person that has a demonstrated history of interest in a particular area and you want to know more about it. Or if you don't know what you want to study, those are questions that we can sort of parse through together, and then we can sort of brainstorm how we want to approach certain questions going forward when you do tour the school. And virtual touring options are also key, I would say in general, but since it's a post-COVID world, I think virtual tours are given a lot more weight now than they were before. I know that back then, I believe what I was told from my admissions advisors was to always go in person and to get their card and to go through all the rungs and the hoops. And so a virtual tour, if you can't go in person, that's always an option. It's better than nothing. But I would recommend going in person. Marcellus, do you have a stance on that?
I think if you can be somewhere in person, it's always great because you're going to get more of a vibe for the situation and understanding of the situation. But don't let that discourage you. Like if cost is a issue or if it's clear across the country, virtual is better than nothing. But if you can be there, it's good to just kind of be around because you're going to not just perceive things about the school, but you're going to perceive things about the students. How are they interacting? What are they doing? What does the environment seem like? Who can I talk to? Are they receptive to you? Those things. So I think in person can be really great, but obviously don't let that discourage you if you just absolutely can't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we covered all. I mean, Jesse killed it. You covered pretty much all of these. So about questions to ask, virtual tours. So I think we can just jump to really the end because I saw so many good questions in the chat. So I think let's just take a few minutes and we can talk about location, cost, and culture. And then I think you can start talking to me and Jesse about, just questions you have, if that sounds good to everyone.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some key considerations. So, and we've talked about a lot of these already. So geography, tuition and financial aid, living expenses and cost of living, campus culture, diversity, and work-life balance and student support services. So I'm going to cover the geographical considerations and tuition and financial aid, and then I'm going to let Jesse wrap us up. But I think it's just really important. Geography does matter because you should think about maybe where you want to practice law. And some people might say, what if I don't know? That's okay as well. But if you do know, that's going to, it's going to be helpful. Because some schools do have a strong regional network. So I can just give you an example. It's not like they pay me to say this, but like, for instance, people might be familiar with Howard Law School. It's in DC. Their ranking might not be, they're not a T14 school, but they have such a strong regional network, such a strong alumni base that having a degree from there is going to take you very far. And many schools have that. Many schools have that reputation. Some people also like to look at proximity to courts and law firms and other legal institutions. So I actually was at Capital Law School, which is actually in downtown Columbus, Ohio, and what was really beneficial is that students got so many internships and externships and they worked at the courts and they could literally walk from it. So they would leave class and could walk 5 minutes and they're at the court. And it was really great because they were able to go back and forth. They were able to interact. They were able to network and see speakers as well. So our students were able to go to pretty much every single event because if it started at 5, their class could end at 4:30 and they would get there by 4:45. And people knew about Capital. And that can be really beneficial because some schools are not really close to a lot of institutions and courts. And then tuition and financial aid. Law school is expensive. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So you want to look at tuition costs, you want to look at available financial aid packages, and I'm going to reiterate that. Look at available financial aid packages, because sometimes what you'll find is that schools will have a high tuition cost, but they also offer quite a bit of scholarship money, financial aid money, etc., which is going to make that better. Even when I was applying to law school, so sometimes I looked at law schools that they cost a lot, but they also were known to give a lot of scholarships, and that worked out for me. And investigate every single scholarship, grant, and loan option it's absolutely possible. And the good thing is most of the schools have a pretty robust database that you can look at, and you'd be surprised at the number of scholarships that we offer. And I'll just give you some personal experience. I often had to be the ultimate decision maker for some scholarships, and for us, we had internal scholarships that we had no applicants for. And that just shows you, yeah, there would be money where, and it can only go from that. So we had alums who would donate money to say the scholarship has to go for this reason for a student who applied for this scholarship. And when we had no one apply, that was just money that was left on the table. You'd be surprised the number of schools have that situation where they say, well, we have $10,000 that we would love to give to a student that we cannot do. So even just doing your due diligence, not just when you're applying to law school, but after your first and second year, because so many people think that, oh, I can only get scholarships when I first start at school. But no, the reality is that there are scholarships that might be available after your first year, your second year, your third year. I've even seen some people have bar scholarships that they've offered as well. So yeah, so just be on the lookout for those. And last thing about that is I don't pass up a really great opportunity. So if a lot of students have come to me and said, hey, there's this really great school that's offering me a full scholarship. Should I do that? Or should I take out $200,000 in loans to go to another school that might be ranked 5 spots higher? You're going to have to make your decision. But what I will say is that if you have those scholarships, if you have those grants, it's going to give you a lot more flexibility. And that means you're not going to have to pay off those loans. So just something to think about.
Awesome. So fostering an inclusive environment. This is something you're going to be able to get a vibe and a gist of when you go to the tour the law school, and that sometimes you can even sit in on a class. I know that I think I had an opportunity to do that prior to applying, but look for an inclusive and supportive campus environment. I think it's important that you go to a school that has a diverse array of ideas and beliefs and interests. That really is what makes for an animated and an engaging discussion in class. And so diversity in the student body can be one way that can be evidenced in the environment, and also the faculty as well. If it's a diverse faculty with a myriad of interests, myriad of specific specialties or research focuses, that's always going to help and enrich your learning experience all that much more. And also, like I think Marcella said, this goes back to the idea of being curious and taking those electives and seeing what you like and don't like, because what you think you like may not be the thing that you ultimately decide is the area that you want to pursue long term in your career. Because oftentimes we think we want something because everyone talks about it, whether that be, for example, corporate law and M&A law. Like, I know a lot of people come into law school thinking that that's what they want to do, then they experience it and then they hate it. Or it's the other way around, where they think they'll hate M&A or corporate law and then they do it and then they actually end up loving it. But ultimately that's something that you can only figure out after you try. And one way to be able to get that experience is if you look for a school that has a diverse student body and faculty and opportunities that are multifaceted. Yes. M&As, mergers and acquisitions, yes. And then maintaining balance. Work-life balance is like the most important thing in law school, yes. And I think, now as I'm a practicing attorney today, it's all the more important for me to be able to, achieve that balance. And it is hard. Students manage stress in different ways, and it's crucial to have a school that provides mental health services, whether it be through the university, through wellness programs, through student organizations, And I think it's really important your first year of law school. I made the mistake of my first semester not really doing anything except for studying, and I didn't even end up performing that well. I think because I burnt out so quickly because I wasn't taking the time to socialize and to take a break and to appreciate the fact that oftentimes our performance academically is dependent to a certain extent on your ability to take breaks and to honor your body and your mind. And if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, you may see diminishing results as an outcome because of the fact that work-life balance is really the name of the game. That's the only way you can succeed in the long run. And just remember that this is a marathon, it's not a race. And so it's important to pace yourself. And this even can be applied even before law school. It can be applied to the admissions process itself because it is a long and arduous journey. You're not going to get a result immediately after submitting the application, and you're not going to complete your application, in the blink of an eye either. It's going to take, multiple iterations of the personal statement. It's going to take likely more than one sitting of the LSAT, depending on how well you do it the first time. And it'll sometimes, unfortunately, you may get deferred or waitlisted, and that would drag on the process even longer. And the people who survive those, lengthy delays and the natural time period that these processes require are those who are able to establish a proper work-life balance and those who have a strong support system. So start building that now. If you have, family and friends that are supportive of you, keep building upon them, keep investing in them, and, hopefully, and they will, I believe, invest back into you when you need it most as well, because this is going to be a long process from admissions to law school to practicing and studying for the bar, passing that, and then practicing law. It's a marathon for sure, and it's not going to be something you can do quickly.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I couldn't have said it better. And so I think we are now into our Q&A stage. We wanted to make sure we left at least 10 minutes for that. So
thank you both. Before we pop into the questions, I wanted to share two really great resources we have on our side. So if you're joining us live, I'll make sure to pop it into the chat, or both of them into the chat, I should say. If you're viewing this at home later on, we will send you the links in the email or a Google search of the names. So one of the awesome resources that we have, if I do say so myself, is Where Should I Go to Law School Quiz. Very in-depth, very thorough. It talks about basically everything that we mentioned on this particular webinar and summarized down. And then we have another one called Which States Have the Hardest Bar Exams? And what that actually is it's the bar exams passing rates by state. I think somebody asked that question. Marcellus, thank you for that awesome link as well. So I just wanted to draw attention to both of those before we go into these questions. Preference on where to start, gentlemen?
I guess we can start from I think there was an alumni network question that we didn't answer yet. Yeah, so how about I take that one, because I think the question was how do you best evaluate an alumni network? And I know some schools have specialized networks for students of color, queer students, etc. And I think that's a really great question. So here's how I would recommend it, and I hope Jesse will fill in the gaps of the things I inevitably miss. But I think when you're looking for an alumni network, the first thing you want to look at is how big is the alumni network? The more people, the more opportunity. You also want to look at what the reach is. And so when people say, like, what do you mean by reach? It means where are the students, where are the graduates going? And so one thing I recommend doing is that most law schools have employment data. And so what you can do is you can go look at some of their employment data and see where are their graduates going. Are they mostly staying in the state? Are they going everywhere? Are they going like a certain region? And then you'll know how far it goes. Then you might want to look at their website, because you want someone not just to have size and reach, but you want to see, like, are they active? Are they engaged? So see, do they have an event? What do they look like? Are they volunteering? What does that really, like, how are they going about things, and also what do they offer? Are they do they offer mentorship programs? Are they offering career guidance? What does that look like? And then I would say, look for success stories. So look around and see, like, is this law school producing people who go on to do really great things? And if you feel like, hey, I can't find that, reach out to admissions, because admissions often has that. They want to share that with you, because the one thing they have to do is brag about their school. So you can ask, hey, what does your alumni network do? Can you give me some data about employment? Can you give me some data about, just how alumni have fared? But the one thing you want to do is make sure you check the website first, because if it's available on the website and you reach out, they'll just direct you to the website. So, I don't know, Jesse, did you have more to add on that?
No, I think you got it perfectly. Yeah, don't ask questions at all. That's on the website, because it just shows you didn't do your research.
Okay.
Maya had said, how important is knowing exactly what type of law you want to practice before applying to law school? You're interested in a lot of different types, but you want to narrow down your interest. So I would say it's not imperative, it's not necessary, but I think it's always better to have a gist or an idea of what you want to pursue, because that shows you have direction, it shows you have gumption, it shows you have initiative to pursue a particular goal in an area. And also that kind of aligns with the whole idea of like knowing what kind of school you want to go to and what you want to specialize in. And that would in turn show the school that you've done your research, because perhaps that school has a particular clinic or a program that specializes in the area that you're interested in, right? That said, I don't think it's like, you're never going to be tethered to the type of law that you talk about in your personal statement. I talked about immigration law in my personal statement, and now I'm practicing medical malpractice. It's completely different and not related at all. And no one's going to come at me I don't think they're going to come to me and say, oh my God, you didn't practice the type of law that you said you wrote about in your personal statement. Do I? Like, no, I didn't lie. I think that was, and so I have a whole spiel about, trying to differentiate and figure out what kind of area of law you might want to talk about in your personal statement. And that is, take yourself out of the equation. If you're completely lost about this question, take yourself out of the equation completely. Lay your transcripts, your resume, and whatever draft or your personal statement you have so far, or whatever writing sample perhaps that you've done in the past from like a great course or something related to your major that you've done. Put it out in front of you and imagine that you're just looking at some materials of an individual that you have no idea who this is or what they're about. And then think about what area of law naturally aligns with the documentation and the papers and the materials that are in front of you. For example, I majored in business and also Chinese language and literature, right? And so I was thinking to myself, I have no idea what kind of area of law I want to pursue, but it also obviously has to align with, there needs to be a nexus or a thread or something that connects my past, my present, and my future. And one thing that I talk about, I even talked about this in my college application for undergrad, which was my experience being a Chinese American and growing up in a traditional Chinese American household where my parents were immigrants, but I'm the first generation. And so I had this dilemma in terms of like, externally, when I go to school, I'm like in this Western world, but then when I come home, it's like a completely Eastern culture, and kind of reconciling those different aspects of my life. And then I thought about a way to tie that into business and Chinese. And that's kind of how I went into the whole personal statement that aligned with my interest in immigration law, because I wanted to serve as an advocate for people who wanted to come from a different country to America to pursue a better future or opportunities that they may not have had the ability to do in their native countries, for example. That was the crux of my personal statement, because it aligned with all of the materials and all the things that I had studied, as well as my identity leading up to my application to law school. But that's just one example, I think, of that one methodology I think you can use if you have absolutely no idea what you want to pursue, if you have absolutely no idea, if there's like a bunch of different things, look to things that naturally align with your experience. Look to things that show that you have a demonstrated history of an interest in this. For example, like you might genuinely have an interest in rocket science, for example, right? But if your curriculum is all like English and history and political science or something like that, and you have nothing on your resume and nothing on your transcript of relating to rocket science, you might genuinely be interested in rocket science and want to pursue rocket science law, right? But that's not really anything that's indicated on your application materials. That's nothing you've actually pursued seriously academically. And so it's going to be a hard sell. So what I mean by that is look to things that you've done, look to things that connect your past to your present, to what you do now as an undergrad or as a recent graduate from college, and then look to how that can connect to a certain area of law that you might want to pursue later on that will allow you to leverage your past experiences both professionally and academically. I think that's your starting point.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is the only time it truly matters is if you have something very, very specific. Like if you want to do admiralty law or maritime law, then you're going to need to look at very specific schools. But speaking as someone who's served on an admissions committee, I've looked at hundreds of applications. We are never going to say, oh, remember that student who really said they want to do criminal law and they're not doing criminal law? We don't care about that. I mean, but what we do care about is that you showed passion, that you were able to tell a story, that, as Jesse said, you have a connection to the things that you were interested in, and that you're a good writer, and that you were able to really take a really large concept and really condense it. And so the last part of that question where it says you're really interested in a bunch of things, one thing I wouldn't recommend is don't go in your personal statement and say, I'm interested in 4 things. Let me tell you why. Tell a very condensed, very specific story, because we're reading hundreds of these, and so you need to stand out. So if you tell me I'm interested in 4 different types of law, you're taking away from telling me more about who you are. And that's what really matters the most. Yeah, and so I think we don't have as much time, so I think we can kind of cycle through the next 2 questions. So how difficult is it to practice outside of your law school region? Does it depend on ranking? It can, but not necessarily. I think the thing from my perspective, what I've seen, if you know that you want to practice outside of your region, so for instance, I went to UNC for law school. I knew people who wanted to practice in California. The thing they did was they started reaching out to California firms, and they made sure that in the summer when they did their internship, they went to California. They made sure that they built those connections. So you can practice outside your region, but you might just have to do some additional work in reaching out and just saying, hey, I want to have those connections there. Rankings will obviously, I'm not going to lie and say they don't matter. So if you went to USC for law school, then you're going to stand out. People are going to know across the country USC versus some other institutions. If you went to Harvard, if you went to some of those schools. But I've seen people from quote unquote the really low ranked schools end up all across the country. And so it really is just about you being focused on what you really want to do. And I'll pass off to Jesse if you have anything else.
No, I think that's I would say name recognition can work to an extent, but no matter where you go, you're going to be able to, that goes back to our alumni network discussion, because you're going to be able to tap into people. You're likely going to be able to tap into people in the region that you're interested in. And just because you go to a name brand school also doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to place yourself anywhere in the country. What is going to place you where you want to be is you and your ability to network, and your ability to be, an employable, enterprising, and, excellent candidate for the job. That's what's going to sell you, and that's what's going to take you where you want to be. It's not, the name isn't going to carry you all the way, even if you were to have the name brand behind you. So yeah, networking is crucial.
I will have to hop in here. We're right on the hour. Let's see. There's a few more questions. I apologize to our audience. We won't be able to get to them tonight. But we do recommend that you either send us an email, book a consultation, and we'll make sure to get those answers to you. So as we wrap up our session on how to choose the right law school, I hope all of you are feeling more confident and prepared for this law school journey and all these important decisions to come. We thank you for joining us, and thank you, Marcellus and Jesse as well. If you have any more questions or need some more personalized advice, please don't hesitate to book a free consultation and reach out to us. We wish you the best of luck on your law school journey and beyond. I hope everyone has a great evening, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thanks.